Thank you very much, and I'll be brief because we're obviously shortening the conference today because of the demonstration later on, and that's a shame because this subject obviously deserves a full-day conference, if not longer, but at least we've made a start by building the conference today. I am representing an inner-city, multicultural, multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-everything community, and I'm very proud to represent that community. And I've been concerned increasingly about the way in which young Muslims particularly are demonised in the media, the way they seem to have excessive attention by some sections of the police force, and the way that they're often demonised in schools and maltreated in schools, and one sees the sort of the rise of general Islamophobia type remarks and so on around the schools. That doesn't all happen by accident, it all comes from somewhere, and this is something we have to look at. Anyone in this room that's been around in political activity or community life for any length of time will remember during the 1960s, and particularly the 1970s and early 1980s, there was endless demonisation of the Irish people, and that was a way of deflecting attention away from the real issues of my view, the need for a united Ireland and the cause of the Irish people. The attacks on Irish people, the jokes that were made in the press by The Sun and other newspapers. Before that, the racist stereotyping of migrants that come to this country from the Caribbean in the 1950s and 1960s, the demonisation of Hindu people when substantial numbers came from India, and going a bit further back, the stereotyping, attacks and demonisation of Jewish people going back to the 19th and early 20th century. It starts with jokes, it moves on with discrimination, it ends up with legislation, it ends up, in the case of the Jewish people, with the Holocaust of the Second World War. That is where all this leads to. It's very important that we recognise that what the Muslim people are going through at the present time, the consistent demonisation of Islam as a faith and a great lack of understanding of it, is part of an historical process, and we are absolutely right to stand firm against Islamophobia in any form, as we stand against racism in any form from wherever it may come within our society. 9/11 happened. Very quickly this became an attack on Islam. We had anti-terror legislation, we had stop and search coming back, we had 28 days detention, and we still have 28 days detention, and we have deportation of people that are deemed to be terrorist suspects within our society to countries that have not signed the International Conventions Against Torture and do not sign up to any of the human rights norms that are supposed to apply in British law. I was one of the minority of people in Parliament that opposed that anti-terror legislation, not because I'm in favour of bombs or terrorism, but because I am in favour of a cohesive society that respects diversity, respects all faiths, respects all religions, and respects all ethnic identities. And I am appalled, and as I agree with Salma absolutely, at what is happening in France over clothing that people choose to wear, what has happened in Switzerland where a national referendum decided against the building of mosques, or minarets rather, which had very little resonance in any of the media around the world. Imagine what the response would be in any other country in the world if a national referendum had decided you couldn't build a Christian church. Imagine what the British media and American media would say about that. That would be as equally wrong as it is to ban people from building mosques. What I want to conclude by saying is this. We, today, this afternoon, will be on the demonstration in solidarity with the people of Gaza and in sympathy with those people that were arrested on the vessels, some of whom were tragically killed, and have paid the ultimate price for an act of humanitarian solidarity with the people of Gaza. Unless the West wakes up to the reality of what life is like for Palestinian people, unless the West wakes up to the sheer misery of living in Gaza, in prison, under siege, with insufficient food, medicines, water, electricity, or anything else to sustain life, and the psychological damage of being in that prison, then the situation is going to get worse and worse and worse. The response of demonizing those people who support Islam, those Muslims who support Palestine, is not going to solve the issue. We have to stand together to oppose any vestiges of Islamophobia whatsoever. Now, we are going into a process in this country where we are still spending billions of pounds every year on the war in Afghanistan, with less and less effect other than increasing deaths of British soldiers, civilians in Afghanistan, and increasing levels of corruption. We've spent billions on the war in Iraq, and there are very large numbers of asylum seekers coming to this country from Iraq to flee from the violence brought about by that war. Ask the question of cause, effect and solution of what that war has brought about. We're also, tragically, going to move into a process where the very poorest in our society, in Britain, are going to be asked to pay for the excesses of the banking crisis by the budget that's being prepared now to come in on the 22nd of June, which will have huge public spending cuts, enormous loss of jobs as a result of that, and greater poverty and probably a double-dip recession as a result of it. It's very easy in a recession to blame minorities, to scapegoat individuals, to scapegoat those that have migrated to our society, or to scapegoat asylum seekers. What we have to do is recognise that this is an issue about identity. It's an issue about culture. It's an issue about race. It's also an issue about class solidarity to protect services, protect jobs, and protect our society from those that would seek to drive it apart. Scapegoats are not the answer. Unity is the answer. Islamophobia is just one of a whole series of attacks on ethnic minorities that have happened and disfigured the history of this country. We have to stand up for all those people that are under attack for their appearance, their ethnicity, their language, or their religion. Therein lies the road to ruin if we don't do it. Please stick together in solidarity with all those that are under attack at the present time. Thank you.